All right, welcome back to Sports Fans Only. I am Sean Mack, being joined by my co-host, KJ, as always. And today we have a special guest. He's the author of The Fix Is In, written in 2010. He also is the author of Disaster Government, Larceny Games, which was about sports gambling and gambling fix in the FBI, which was so interesting. Also, he's the author of The Season in the Abyss, written in 2015, which was about sports gambling versus the NFL integrity, which is just meat and potatoes for us. And then finally, in 2019, he wrote The Fix Is Still In, which was about more corruption and conspiracies the sports world and the league don't want you to know about. How you doing, Brian?
Good. How you guys doing?
I'm
Great.
well. I'm
Great,
well. It's
great.
good to have you here, boss. All right, so Brian, let's hop right into it. I'm gonna pick up from where I left off at with the Fix Is In, Still In. I have a question. Why do you think most sports fans actually don't believe that the game they love can actually be fixed?
I think it's a combination of things. I think part of it is the sports media never investigates for this sort of thing, because a lot of times, actually I shouldn't say a lot of times, all the time, sports media, ESPN, NBC, Fox Sports, they literally fund the sports leagues. So they never do any real, true investigative reporting and uncover dirt for themselves, because, if ESPN spends $1 billion a year on Monday Night Football, well, why would they investigate the NFL for wrongdoing and shoot themselves in the foot and destroy that investment by saying, hey, this league is corrupt or that sort of thing? So part of it is the sports media won't do this. It's all left up to law enforcement, which really doesn't care about sports for the most part.
Fully understood.
So, the way it's portrayed in the media is everything's clean and fine and dandy. There's no, performance enhancing drugs being used. There's no players with gambling problems. There's nothing going on. It's all happy fun time, with the leagues. But I think the other thing too is fans don't want to know in many ways, because it ruins the fantasy of it all.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of fans project themselves into the games, whether they project themselves into a player's role or a coaching managerial role. They believe in that fantasy too. And they think, well, if I was in that player's position or I was in that coach's position, I would, live up to all the stupid cliches that are out there. I would give 110% and take it to the next level and blah, blah, blah. But they don't think of it as, for many of these players, it's a job and it can be a grind. And sometimes it's not as fun as it looks. And they don't want to necessarily think about those aspects where if a player underperforms or drops a pass or screws up a ground ball or whatever, he may be having a lot of off the field issues that aren't getting addressed. And so they blame the player for lack of, trying or not playing hard enough or whatever. But they can't disassociate themselves from the game because they project themselves right into it.
Now, let me just hop in here real quick, Sean, Matt. Now, I was watching. Now, when he told me you were coming on the show, I went back, watched a lot of your interviews, and a lot of the stuff, no, very interesting. A lot of the stuff you were saying it just hit me. Like, for instance, I had no idea that there were laws when it comes to intellectual games. And then when it comes to entertainment type games, I didn't know that there was laws set up to where you can't really tamper with the stuff like Jeopardy, Wheel of Fortune, stuff like that. But when it comes to entertainment, whether it be football, baseball, anything having to do with entertainment, there's really no laws that say that the people that own these teams or the commissioner or whatever can't go to these referees and say, hey, let's call a few extra holding calls on this team because for our ratings, we'd rather see the Patriots or whoever it may be make it to the Super Bowl. When did that start? When were these laws passed?
Well, they're old. So,
Really?
the one in terms of intellectual contests, that goes back to the 1950s.
Wow.
So back then, the quiz show programs, and there were several of them. There's like the $64,000 question and some of these other ones. They were being rigged by the television networks. And a big congressional investigation was actually launched and uncovered this whole scandal that was going on. And they were being rigged in the exact same way that I say sports are rigged today, is they were being rigged to make them more entertaining, to create more drama and to get more people watching. And so when that got busted by Congress, they passed a law, which was, basically known as the Quiz Show Act. And that says you cannot fix an intellectual contest for television purposes, but that doesn't apply to sports. And it doesn't even apply to things like Survivor or The Bachelor, The Bachelorette, or a lot of reality television, because they're not intellectual contests. Sports is a physical contest. It's entertainment. And the other law that exists is basically called the Sports Bribery Act, and that was passed in 1964. and that says you can't bribe a player, a coach, or a referee to alter the outcome of a sporting event. And that's literally like the whole law. It's like 3 sentences long. But the thing is, if you're like the NFL, and like you mentioned, with holding, if the NFL directs its referees and says, we don't want you to call holding because we want Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers or one of these quarterbacks to succeed, and the referees go out and do exactly that, well, they're not breaking the law because they're not being bribed. It's just the employer, the NFL, telling the employee how to do their job. And there you have it. The game is altered. The game is fixed. The game is manipulated, and yet it's not breaking the law. And the thing is, back in the Spygate thing, Jets fans sued the Patriots over that. Okay. And in the court, what the court decided was in the Patriots and the NFL's favor, because when you buy a ticket to a game, all the NFL has to do is basically put on a football game. It doesn't mean certain rules have to be followed. Doesn't mean certain players have to play or perform up to a certain level. It just, as long as the NFL doesn't put on a basketball game or a baseball game, they put on a football game, they've fulfilled their obligation to fans. So it's not even fraud if the game is being rigged, because all they have to do is play football, or at least some semblance of football, and they fulfilled their obligation to the ticket buying public. So what, do you have at home? What kind of guarantee do you have at home if you're just watching it on television for free?
So by them manipulating the spread, the whole Vegas thing, that they consider that different than, because they are affecting, finances, because there's money coming in and out of,
but not by them. So I mean, the NFL isn't the one booking the bets, right? I mean, Major League Baseball isn't booking the bets. Someone else is doing that. So if a game is being manipulated, you as a bettor, it's still a 50-50 shot, right?
That's true. Yeah, you're right.
The fix only matters if it's being fixed and you're in on the fixed and you could profit from the fix. But if you're just an outsider who's just, basically flipping a coin saying, I think the Dolphins will win this week and not the Jets, well, that's up to you. That's on you.
That law is so vague that I could see how somebody can, there's a lot of loopholes in there. I mean, if you said it's only 3 sentences or one little sentence.
Yeah, the Sports Bribery Act is literally 3 or 4 sentences.
So there's a lot of ways to get around that. So go ahead, Sean Mack.
It just made me think, I'm a little off cuff here, but it just made me think about when in sports, we know that a certain referee is going to call a certain game and he's known for being tough. It's a way to kind of overshadow and hide the fix. Because if this guy's going to get in and we know he makes a lot of calls, so when he started to make that call, let's say on a Ryan Artest, we're gonna not look at it as in a way of cheating. We're gonna look at it, well, he's a tough caller. But it's a nice little setup that they have. One more question, Brian.
Well, wait, before, just one quick thing on that. I mean, I think everybody who's watched sports has heard, whether it's especially basketball or football, where the commentators will even say, well, the referees are really letting them play out there today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, isn't that basically saying, well, the referees aren't following their own rules that they're supposed to be enforcing?
That's exactly
and so
what
the question is, if they're not enforcing their own rules, why?
Yeah.
Why? I mean, if they're letting, the defensive backs crawl over the wide receivers and never calling defensive pass interference, why? Yeah. And then all of a sudden, it'll happen late in the fourth quarter and give some team a 50-yard gain. And nobody will, complain because well, that was clearly pass interference. Well, where were the other 10 times that it happened? And so that's why I think, I think fans have the right to be skeptical of all this stuff, because you see it week in and week out. And it's if you have a rule book and this is holding, then, you should call holding every time it happens.
Yeah.
Pass interference, you should call it every time it happens. If this is a block, if this is a charge in basketball, then you should call it every time it happens. You shouldn't let it go 10 times and call it the 11th, because then it just makes everything look suspicious, even if it's not.
Yeah.
It still makes it look suspicious because you can't just willy-nilly enforce these, subjective calls.
Yeah, so true, so true. Now, when the fix is in, no pun intended, where does it start from? Is it from the top? Is it the owners and the GMs, in your opinion, or do you believe it starts with the coach and the players?
No, I think if it's the NFL or the NBA wants a playoff series to go a certain length, or they want certain teams to succeed, that's coming from the very upper echelon. Because, I mean, you've seen it in NBA with game tanking. I mean, in game tanking, it's not the coaches and players deciding, well, we're just going to lose because we'll help the team by giving them better draft pick odds.
Yeah.
That's coming from ownership or at least the general manager, who's, transferring that message down to the players and the coach. So I think we know that happens. It's been basically proven that happens. So why do those NBA games at the end of the season, if those don't matter, then does really any regular season NBA game matter? And if none of those matter, then do really playoff games matter? And do the finals games matter? I mean, it's a slippery slope. Once you start that, but I think we've seen, especially now with Brian Flores and Hugh Jackson saying that basically the Dolphins and the Browns claim to do the same thing, and we're willing to pay these guys to do it, supposedly, which again, that would be a violation of the Sports Bribery Act.
Okay.
That would definitely be a federal offense, and the FBI should actually be investigating this stuff right now based on the claims those guys made. But I think we've shown that it's coming from the upper end of the league, or at least ownership, to manipulate these games. And like I say, I don't think it's professional wrestling. I don't think every game's fixed. I don't think they need to be. But I think when a certain time, a certain storyline, certain stars might be in trouble, that's when they, certain teams get the help, get the push that's needed.
Yeah, you definitely stole my thunder with the whole Miami Dolphins thing. I was going to ask you that. Why is he not? Any logical reason why he's not being investigated? Why? I mean, I guess you answered it already. Why would ESPN plaster this guy all over ESPN, and they're paying him, basically him and 31 other owners, to have their product on their channel? So I guess I kind of answered my own question. So.
But like you said, though, it should be the FBI.
Yeah,
the FBI, all intents and purposes, should be on this, because that is like the literal definition of sports bribery: is the owner giving the coach $100,000 to intentionally lose a game. That's bribing a guy to lose a game. That's the essence of the law. So the FBI should be all over this, but I'm sure they're not.
So
they don't care.
It's safe to say that it might even go higher than just the leagues.
True. I mean, it's very possible.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to know. A lot of this stuff, I'm just kind of an independent researcher writer. I can only do so much. I have no financial backing. No one's helping me or providing me a budget to be able to go do these sorts of things. Even when I do get stuff produced, like I had an article this guy Lance Williams and I wrote for Sports Illustrated, and it literally took us a year of investigating and writing and trying to find some outlet to publish it, which Sports Illustrated finally published. But a year's worth of work, each of us made $1,000.
Wow.
So, it's not like I could sit back and work on an article for a year and at the end of it get $50,000 for doing some sort of work. It's like, well, here's, some chump change. Thanks.
Wow.
Yeah, but you know what? I give you props, because that showed the dedication that you have for what you do.
Definitely. Real quick,
because nobody will do it.
Yeah.
No, you're right.
Exactly.
Well, I saw you talking, and you were saying that you got to be real careful. I also noticed, before I get to that, you don't really tie because some people may consider what you do as like conspiracy theory. Because
I don't.
Because like you said, I told you I love it. But there's some people that may consider it that, but you don't really tie that to anything that you do. Like, you don't put conspiracy theory at the end of, whatever title to your books or anything like that, right? You kind of leave that separate.
I try not to, because I don't think it's conspiracy theory. In my opinion, I'm a skeptic.
Yes.
And I think skeptics hijacked the word skeptic.
Yes.
Because a lot of times there's actually magazines called the Skeptical Inquirer, and what they do is investigate conspiracy theories.
Oh,
and that to me isn't really being a skeptic.
Yeah.
The conspiracy theory is being the skeptic, because here's the main party line, and here's what the media says that reflects the party line, and the skeptic should be the one questioning, well, is all of that true? And that's what I feel like I do for sports is, the NFL runs these games and these are the outcomes, and the media backs it up and says, oh, well, maybe that was a bad call or blah, blah, blah. But nobody's skeptical of the whole process. And that's what I try to do is I just question. I'm like, well, is this legitimately the way things are going? Because I can prove that the leagues can fix their own games, and I could prove they have a motive and the means to fix their own games. So maybe they are. And shouldn't I be able to be skeptical of all that?
Yeah.
That there's a chance that, what they put on is real isn't real.
Yeah.
Because everything else in show business, every other reality television show we know is scripted, produced, selectively edited. It's basically completely manipulated, whether it's The Bachelor, like you say, Survivor, and these other home renovation shows or whatever. Those are all not real.
Yeah.
So why do we think the NFL and the NBA and the rest are 100% real when, again, there's motive and a means to fix it all and make it kind of unreal, but yet at the same time make billions of dollars off of that?
Yeah. Now, these next two questions are going to hurt, and I'll let you know why, because I am a fan, and I do. as time passed along and went by, I understand that it is, but I'm going to ask it anyway. In your opinion, was Game 7 of the 2000 Western Conference Finals between the Lakers and Blazers fixed? And if so, what were some of the telltale signs?
That was okay. I gotta think about this for a second. So that was back when it was the Trailblazers had like Rasheed Wallace and
Pippen.
Yep.
And they played the Lakers, which was Kobe and Shaq.
Right. Yep.
Well, who do you want in the finals? I mean, if you're not a fan, if you're a casual fan, who do you want in the finals, right?
Yeah.
Who do you want to watch? You really want to watch Rasheed Wallace and Arvydas Sabonis play?
Yeah.
Or do you want to see Shaq and Kobe?
Yeah.
Well, wasn't it so obvious with the calls, with the 25 foul shots in the fourth quarter? Wasn't it so obvious?
Well, was it? I mean, how many people questioned it back then, right?
All right, I was a fan.
I mean, I'm just playing devil's advocate because I mean, my assessment would be,
Yeah.
it clearly was manipulated and fixed to make sure the Lakers went.
Yeah.
And for the reason was television ratings and Shaq and Kobe versus whatever was on that Trailblazers team. It wasn't necessarily legitimate basketball. I think didn't two of those guys foul out, like Pippen and somebody else foul out in the game?
Yeah,
too?
they did.
They did.
Yeah. So how often does that happen in the NBA history?
In the playoffs, never.
In the conference finals.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But two guys go out and
I know.
Again, so I mean, nobody back then was raising red flag and saying, "Oh my God, this game was fixed and this is what the NBA wanted." Everybody just went, "Oh, that kind of really sucked," and oh well.
I think it's like what you said. I think most people wanted to see the Lakers.
I did. I was a Laker fan.
Yeah.
Like, oh, great. They finally given us the calls that they missed in the first quarter.
Yeah.
That's how I looked at it.
Well, and that's just the thing. So, I mean, the only, the fixes in is usually the cry of the loser.
Yeah.
So the Trailblazer fans saying, "Oh my God, this was fixed against us." Well, you lost. You know, those were clearly fouls that the referees called against you. It was all legitimate. And, you're just crying boo-hoo. But, in reality, again, how much money was at stake? How much did the NBA have to make and lose based off of that outcome?
Yeah.
And that's where I think you just kind of follow the money.
Now, this next game, still with the Lakers, we kind of know where we're going here, but we have kind of proof of a witness. Do you believe former referee Tim Donaghy was accurate when he said the 2002 Western Conference Finals between the Lakers and Sacramento was a fix? Because he said it was.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I believe. I mean, they've called it the worst officiated game in NBA history.
Wow.
And how does that happen if it's not intentional?
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people don't like Donaghy because now he's a convicted felon.
Yeah.
And I try to separate myself because it's interesting. At the same time that all that happened was basically when my first book came out. And so it kind of reinforced everything I was writing. So I try to keep a skeptical eye on it because I don't want to just fall into it because, well, here's the guy who's backing up exactly what I say. But he did in many ways back up exactly what I say. And he said the NBA directed the referees without explicitly saying, "Hey, we want team A to beat team B." But they met with them during playoff series and say, "Okay, focus on these fouls. Don't focus on those fouls. Watch this. Don't watch that." And essentially told them, "We want team A to beat team B." But they wouldn't come out and say it. They didn't put it in writing.
Yeah.
But that's essentially the message that was conveyed. And the referees were no dummies. They're like, well, we got to do what we're told. And it's probably going to help this team. But it's apparently what the league wants. So there you have it. And that game, that was a game 6, I think, 2002. That was ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, there was another one where I think didn't the Lakers have like a huge, like 20 free throws in the fourth quarter or something like that?
They were down. Insane. They were down 15, and they came back in the fourth quarter, all by mostly free throws.
So I mean, it just reeks of corruption. But again, sports fans can get up in arms about it, and most of the time, this stuff, especially like the 2000 one with the Trailblazers, is forgotten about, especially within sometimes a week, but sometimes a year. And now, 20 years later, most people, they weren't even born when it happened.
Exactly.
So it's forgotten about it. And that's the thing, is the leagues can get away with this stuff because there's always another game. There's always another season. And as soon as the next season starts, the next game starts, a lot of that stuff just blows right past people. So
gotcha.
They have no, what is the incentive for the leagues to fix this supposed officiating problem? Because there's not enough complaints. There's not enough people tuning out because of it. So there's no reason to fix it. Fix what's perceived as an officiating problem. I should say.
Well,
Now,
Kay,
speaking,
hold on, Kay. First, I just want to let everyone know that you're listening and watching Sports Fans Only. We're here with author Brian Tuohy, and he's just chatting it up with us, giving us all the juice that we've always known that was in the back of our mind. We just don't like to accept it because our team are winning sometime. Go ahead, Kay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's all good. Now, have you guys noticed that referees don't really give interviews? Now, after I went and did some research on you, I was like, let me go back and see, has there been any referees that have been on good standing, like people other than Tim, what's his last name? Donahue. Other than people like him, referees don't really do interviews after they're retired. Now, I'm wondering, is there some type of clause in their contract? Because you don't hear about referees talking about this. Are they paid good after they retire? Like, seems like they go real silent after they leave.
Right. The last time I seen Joey Crawford was the last game that he refereed back in the late 90s or early 2000s.
Isn't it amazing? They just disappear off into the sunset and you never hear from them again. So you don't have journalists such as yourself who can question them or just ask them a few questions about it.
No,
I just wanted your opinion.
No, I mean, it is true. I mean, the only time maybe you see it is if one of them releases a book, like their autobiography or something like that. And then, they'll bring up certain little things, but they won't talk about the grand scheme of it all. Yeah. And it's interesting, even like right now after the NFL game, there's like one person who's allowed to ask one referee a series of questions about the game. But you don't have a huge panel with all the referees and all the media sitting there and going, hey, how'd you blow that call? Hey, how come you called this? Hey, how come that took so long to review? You don't get any of that sort of thing.
You don't.
And it is interesting. I mean, it's a good question. Why? And the thing that bothers me is when people say, oh, that was a horrible call. This guy's a horrible official. Well, it's amazing how many, especially after something as, egregious as like when that Saints Rams pass interference call was.
Just thinking
that was ridiculous.
I'm from New Orleans originally. I'm from New Orleans, born and raised. I live in Connecticut now. But yeah, that hurt me.
Well, and what happened? Nothing. The refs weren't fined. They weren't suspended. They weren't fired.
Nope.
So did they really screw up?
No. Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. If I did something like that, I think at my job in a national stage, there'd be repercussions if I made a mistake that bad.
Yeah.
And yet these guys had none. And that happens in all of these leagues. I mean, the only guy I think it ever happened to is there's an NHL ref about, was it 2 years ago, who got caught on a hot mic saying that he intentionally called a penalty against another team because he needed to basically make a makeup call.
That actually just happened in Tampa Bay as well. In the Super Bowl. Oh, was it the Super Bowl? No, it was Tampa against the Cowboys. If you go on YouTube and type in ref almost blows. Anyway, you hear him on the mic and he said, let's not call it on that guy. Let's call it on this. And the other guy said, turn the mic. He said, turn the mic off. And so he turned it off. I'll try to get you the link for that later on. But yeah, it's amazing.
Well, but that NHL official lost his job, but he was going to retire at the end of the year anyway. So, I mean, he got cut off 3 months early or something. But it goes to show that is going on in these guys' brains. And usually, again, there's no repercussions for it.
Yeah. You know what surprised me was maybe 3 years ago when the tennis fix came in. And it was over 400 to 500 matches that they can prove had been fixed. And they admitted that it was. But what got me was it was all of the 300 ranked, 200 ranked, 100 ranked tennis players to where they're not on our radar. Who's really paying attention to them? I didn't even know you can really bet on that type of tennis like that. But come to find out that the fix was in. It was over 400 to 500 matches spanning back, I think, a decade. And that just surprised me because I didn't think tennis would actually, I didn't know.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, for gambling, just for gambling purposes, I mean, there's been proven fixes, like you said, in tennis. There's been numerous proven fixes in soccer. There's been proven fixes in rugby, in cricket. And I mean, literally all over the world in all the major sports except the United States.
Yeah.
And that makes zero sense because what's another crime that happens all over the globe but does not happen here?
Yeah.
I mean, come on. I mean,
yeah.
I understand that, supposedly, our athletes make too much money, especially our pro athletes. You can't bribe them to fix a game, blah, blah, blah. But, some of these guys have to have drug problems. Some of these guys have to have gambling problems. Some of these guys, may have blown all their money. Was it Patrick Ewing who famously said, well, we make a lot of money, but we spend a lot of money too? So some of these guys have left the game bankrupt. I mean, did Allen Iverson leave the game completely bankrupt, and Antoine Walker leave completely bankrupt, and Mark Brunell went bankrupt after a long career in the NFL. I mean, these guys blow money.
Yeah.
And so to think that just because they make supposedly these big contracts that they can't be approached or can't be blackmailed into fixing games, I think is really naive. Because again, who's looking for it?
Yeah.
Who's going to investigate for it? And I know you just can't throw a dart at the board of all the names in the NFL and say, well, that guy probably is involved. Something has to, spark interest, spark some sort of investigation. But again, if nobody's going to even bother looking for it, you're never going to find it.
If I don't know if you guys seen it, but on Netflix, I don't know if it's still there, but there's a documentary on soccer over there in Europe. And when you want to talk about corrupt when it comes to fixing games and stuff like that, they were doing things that we wouldn't even think of. Like people were getting kidnapped. I mean, there was like crazy stuff going on over there. So I'm wondering if it's anything like that. Of course, I don't think it's like that, but if it's anything close to that over here, we're in trouble.
Well,
what if this ever comes out?
Former mob boss Mike Versace. Have y'all seen any interviews? I'm pretty sure you might have, Brian.
Oh, yeah.
And he was speaking on in the early 80s to mid 80s that all the college students that he would step to and make them throw games. And I'm like, once again, it seemed like the onus always falls on the player, but I never hear anything about the coaching, the GM, the owner. Nope. And that's just amazing that he had that much information about certain games over like maybe a 4-year period. And it just, I don't know, it just confused me. And I'm like, why don't anyone do anything about it? But I guess,
Well, here's the interesting thing about Francesi too, is, the NFL claims they've never had a game fixed in their 100-year history. Never. It's never happened, right?
Wow.
Major League Baseball says it hasn't happened since the 1919 World Series. The NBA hasn't had a game fixed since like 1954, and the NHL since like the late 1940s. Well, Michael Francesi comes out, and he's a former mob boss, says, I fixed games in the NFL. I think he says at least Major League Baseball, maybe the NBA, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the leagues hired him to basically be in this video that the FBI co-produced with NBA Productions, which I have a copy of, but I can't release because of long story.
Okay. Wow.
But anyway, they made this training video that the FBI would go around to every team before in spring training or before the season started and talk to them about the dangers of gambling and drugs. But they have Francesi in this video talking about how he influenced games. But at the same time, the league says it's never happened. So somebody's lying. But the fact is, they paid him to be in the video. So why would they pay a guy they know is lying? Yeah. Wouldn't they maybe pay a guy who's telling the truth? So someone is lying, and the odds are it's leagues that are lying.
Yeah. Because
that's the really interesting thing. And the thing that bugs me too about Francesi is supposedly if he fixes these games, he won't even name. I understand not naming the players, but why wouldn't he name the games or at least the seasons or something? Give some sort of more credence to what he's saying. Because I do think he's telling the truth. But
me too.
I found it really interesting that the league say it's never happened, yet they hired a guy who said he fixed games.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that they benefited off of that too. It wasn't just the players getting money. I'm sure general managers, I'm sure people in the staff and stuff like that got money to help as well. Because if he could walk up to a player, why couldn't he walk up to an assistant coach to call a game different? You know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, I heard the first time I ever heard about any fixing, I think I was like maybe 7 years old. So this is 86. I'm born and raised in New Orleans. And do you remember Hot Rod Williams for Tulane? Actually, he threw a game. He played in the NFL. He played in the NBA. You remember him?
Didn't he play for Cleveland? Was it Cleveland? Who did he play for?
Cleveland. Hot Rod Williams. Yeah, but that was the first time I ever heard about it. But they say that he said someone stepped to him pretty forcefully and told him he had to do it.
Yeah, I think, and also in here in Stamford, Connecticut, his last name is Cobb. Another documentary that was on Netflix. I think the mob guy we were just talking about. They actually, I think he went to Boston College. They had a big.
That was a different guy.
Oh, it was different.
That was the guy from Goodfellas, Henry Hill.
Oh, Henry Hill. Yes.
Yeah.
He was big. Yeah. He was big into that too, as far as fixing games and stuff like that too. So,
well, and I mean, really, honestly, especially in the college level, it's got to be very easy. I mean, it really does. I mean, I don't think it takes a lot of money, especially when most of these kids aren't getting paid in any way, shape, or form. At least above the table getting paid.
Yeah.
So if you got the kind of money and you have the kind of ability to put down a decent amount of money on a basketball game, to approach a kid and say, hey, look, you're playing Duke next week, they're favored by 20 points. How about you make sure you lose by at least 21 or more?
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to lose anyway.
Yeah.
We know it's going to happen. So what's the difference to you? I'll give you $5,000. I'll give you 10 grand to ensure that you lose by more than that 20. What do you say? I mean, why wouldn't you as a kid?
Yeah.
I mean, especially if you know you're not going to the NBA, if you have no hope of going to the NBA, but you're still a major college player, why wouldn't you take that easy money?
Yeah.
I mean, it's unfortunate, but it's just the way it works.
But
Very true.
I was speaking with C. Anthony. He does boxing. He's my brother for the channel. And he's solely convinced that Patrick Mahomes threw the second half of the AFC Championship game. He was like
really
totally convinced. Yeah, he was like, Sean, I looked at the first half and I look at the second half. No way that guy forgot how to play football.
Yeah.
I mean,
Go back and watch it, Kay. Oh boy, it's funny.
Here's the crazy thing, which also blows people's minds. So let's say Patrick Mahomes bet on Cincinnati to win that game, and then Patrick Mahomes intentionally basically tanked the second half of that game. There's no crime. If he bet against himself, if he went out and bet against himself, lost the game, there's no crime committed.
Yeah.
No.
It's just
so. I mean, that's funny because they bring Calvin Ridley just got in a bunch of trouble for betting.
Oh yes, right.
On his own games and whatever. He's not. Notice the law enforcement police haven't come to his home and taken him away.
No,
he didn't break any law. No, he just broke an NFL rule.
Yeah,
that you can't bet on NFL football. But
that's more of an ethical thing. Well, that's what they. But
that's the thing is. So I mean, that's why, like I say, I argue Pete Rose shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
because Pete Rose is supposedly only betting on the Reds to win. Which, a lot of guys are going to say, well, what's the problem? If Calvin Ridley's betting on his team to win, what's the big deal? Well, here's the thing. He didn't bet on every game that the Falcons are playing to win. He bet on certain games for the Falcons to win. And the same thing that Pete Rose did. So Pete Rose is the manager. He would bet on his own team, do everything he could to win the game he bet on. He'd blow through his bullpen, blow through his bench, basically wear his team out to win the game he bet on. And in the next game, he wouldn't bet on the Reds and let his team rest. And so he was basically in a way fixing the one game to try to win, in a way fixing the second game in order to lose because he was going to bet on the third game with his team rested now.
Yeah.
And he was also basically tipping off all the bookies he was working with, saying, well, Pete bet on the Reds today, but he didn't bet on it. He's not betting on them tomorrow. I think tomorrow I'm going to load up on whoever is playing the Reds because Pete ain't betting on them. So, I mean, even though you're betting on your own team, you're giving away a lot of inside information, whether you realize it or not. And that's why you can't legitimately have players betting on their own league, especially even if they're betting on themselves. Because again, if they're not going to do it for all 17 games in the NFL, then they shouldn't be doing it at all.
It's interesting.
True.
Very interesting.
Oh boy, I could do this all day.
I'm all out of questions, man. I don't know if you have any more you want to.
No, that was great. I think we've taken up enough of this time. I appreciate it. Now
that was beautiful,
guys.
When I Google you, I love this the way that they worded it. Controversial author. Do you consider yourself controversial? Do you? Not what other people feel about you. Do you?
I don't think of it as that way. Like I say, I don't think of myself as a conspiracy theorist. But and sadly, that's kind of like what sells. Controversy sells, conspiracy sells. If I just call myself a skeptic, people But again, that's what I think it is. I think I'm just being skeptical of what's being purported to be true. And I think every sports fan has the right to do that. They should call this stuff into question because, every league, especially like NFL, well, we have to protect our integrity. Well, I can show so many holes in your integrity just off of stuff in the general news that you don't have integrity. Yeah. So if you're going to tell me these games are completely legit because of your integrity, well, I'm not going to buy that. I'm just not going to. And it's the same with baseball, Major League Baseball. They admitted that they can control the baseball. They could, within their tolerances of creating a baseball, they can make a ball that'll fly 30 feet farther than another baseball, and yet both will be legal. So who's to say when Major League Baseball says, hey, throw in one of those home run balls, we want this team to catch up, bam, zoom, there goes the ball over the fence, and then put the dead ball back in the next inning so it doesn't happen so we can get this into extra innings or whatever. I mean, who's to say? I mean, how do you know which baseballs are which?
Yeah.
But Major League Baseball has completely admitted that they've tampered with the balls and can control the balls in terms of how far they fly. Well, again, that's affecting games, right? That's affecting players' salaries. That's affecting outcomes of baseball games. It's affecting everything within the sport, and nobody cries about it.
Yeah.
How far does the rabbit hole go?
Well, I know for sure that Major League Baseball knew about what the Houston Astros were doing. They knew.
Oh, they had to.
But again, they were Houston strong that year. Wasn't that a great story?
Yeah.
They were Houston strong after the hurricane, and then they won the World Series, and everybody was happy. But yet they were cheating the whole time. And like you said, I'm sure Major League Baseball knew, and that was a great way for Major League Baseball to make sure that story went to its completion and they won the World Series, is by letting them cheat the whole time.
Yep. And sell that merch. Can't forget about the selling of the merch when you like polarize a certain team in a certain city. It escalates like tenfold. So
it's all about the money.
All right, so that's been fun.
That was great.
Anything else I can do for you, Brian Tuohy? Anything else, Tuohy?
No, you guys got. Anytime you guys want me back, you know where to reach me.
All right, man. Yeah, definitely.
All right, I've been Sean Mack with my co-host KJ, and we have the controversial author Brian Tuohy. It was a pleasure, and this is Sports Fans Only. Peace.